Welcome back to the Relaxing Ghost channel here on YouTube. Today we're going to take an updated look at the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2021. There have been major announcements regarding this year's Hall of Fame, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be more of a virtual ceremony this year. There's been a lot of changes and some new inductees. So this has always been one of my favorite parts of the year regarding WWE and the whole WrestleMania weekend. I've always been a big fan of the WWE's Hall of Fame. You get one last chance to see some of your favorites and hear from them and get a retrospect of their careers. So as of the end of March, there have been 4 new additions for this class of 2021. I'm not 100% sure how they're going to do this. They're still going to do the 2020 class. Not sure if that'll be all in one night. I hope not, because let's be real here. Some of these have gone, way too long in terms of length. Thank Mr. T and Hillbilly Jim for that. But, despite some of those bad ceremonies, it is always cool to hear these stories and whatnot. So first up, Batista had announced that he will not be taking part in this year's ceremony or as part of the 2020 class. So he will be held off for a later date. And obviously this is probably more of a commitment thing, or maybe he's just being honest and he wants to have fans in attendance and, say goodbye to the fans one last time. So Big Dave Batista will not be taking part in the Hall of Fame ceremonies. So it was originally going to be the NWO, Batista, JBL, Jushin Thunder Liger, the British Bulldog. That was a pretty stacked class. So they could definitely save Batista for a later date. And 2021, I believe we have 4 or 5 already announced. Oh, the Bellas also a part of that 2020 class. And 2020 will be looking good. 2021, we got 4 pretty good studs here. First up, they announced Molly Holly on WWE's Bump show. So that it's maybe where they're going to be announcing a lot of these. Usually they did them on Raw or SmackDown or whatever. But Molly Holly definitely deserving of this. She was really inspired by the Macho Man Randy Savage back in the late 90s. And he pretty much paid for her wrestling school training and whatnot, and he took her under her wing. And I mean, you can't really learn from much better than a guy like Savage. Even though it was at a later part of his career, he had this stuff down to a science. The psychology, the promos. He was pretty much the top of his game when it came to all around. Molly Holly, maybe not the in ring, but very likable person. She's been in a lot of the women's Royal Rumbles and whatnot past couple of years, and multi-time women's champion, big feuds with Trish and Lita and things like that. At a time when WWE wasn't really focused on the women's division, she was a big part of that division, in revitalizing it. Next up, I believe, was Eric Bischoff, former president of WCW. And I do want to get a video out on the 20-year anniversary that WCW went out of business. But I definitely approve of Eric going into the Hall of Fame. I'm big supporter of Bischoff and whatnot, and bringing Hogan and all those guys to WCW, creating the NWO was a big part of the Monday Night Wars. And Bischoff, he's had success pretty much everywhere he's went. Started his career again in the AWA. He's had some time under his belt, and he's been pretty successful doing it. Hasn't had many matches, but he's been more of a on-screen figure and more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. They did try to bring him back a couple of years ago now as the what was he, executive producer or something of Raw a couple of years back, and it's when they brought back Bischoff and Heyman, and yeah, that didn't last too long. Um, it was shocking news at the time, but I can just see like how many people bet that this wasn't gonna last long, and now we have Bruce Pritchard back in WWE. But Bischoff was, at the head of the table, running WCW, turning it from a, company that was making, 50 million a year, losing money, to a company that made well over $300 million a year, with 250 million in the books, selling out arenas, competing and beating the WWE week after week for 80 plus weeks. And what a time to be a wrestling fan. That was crazy times in the mid to late 90s. Pretty much, Nitro and Thunder, those are all his ideas. And competing with Vince was a big part of his plan to kind of boost up WCW, and bringing in guys like Hogan and Savage, and then later on, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, competing and being very successful. It did kind of take over WCW with all these creative control clauses and contracts and whatnot, but Bischoff really kind of stuck it to Vince and enjoyed himself while doing it. Maybe the NWO went on for far too long. You could look back at like the Finger Poke of Doom and NWO 2000 with Jarrett and whatnot, but he was a big part of the Monday Night Wars and the success of Nitro and WCW. So he definitely deserves a spot on in the WWE's Hall of Fame. A lot of people will complain that there's no physical Hall of Fame and whatnot. There are rumors, there had been rumors that they've been working on a physical Hall of Fame for going back a couple years now. Whether that's true or not, it's definitely something the fans would like to see. I definitely would want to go. I remember there was this place in Canada here with WWE in Niagara Falls, and they had all kind of cool stuff there. And think of all the stuff you would see in there. Old championships and different robes of Ric Flair, and wrestling boots and trunks and all kinds of stuff. Different memorabilia and things like that. All the stuff they have in a WWE warehouse just sitting around collecting dust. I'm sure it's crossed their minds, but it'd be a losing venture, kind of like WWF New York back in the day. But that's something, it'd have to be, in the right spot at the right place. Um, it's always going to be a topic of discussion. Next up, they kind of did 2-for-1 the last announcement, and it was Kane and the Great Khali. So WWE's India network or whatever announced Khali would be a member of the WWE's Hall of Fame. This will probably be one of those speeches that goes on for about 2 minutes. Um, you know, I mean, sure, I'm sure you could have had a few others before Khali, but sure. Um, I've never really been a fan of Khali, but former world heavyweight champion, and that's really about it. He's kind of got the big big thing going on where he's awkward in the ring. Not many guys can do much to him, and his matches were more physical, on his side, but he really couldn't take much. It was hard to give him moves and things like that, unless you were Cena. Slam him around a few times, but he was more of a dominant guy. You could push and start pushes with him, and I don't know. I don't have much good to say about Khali. And then Kane, one of the greatest of all time, absolutely deserves a spot here. From his debut in '97, the character lasted the test of time, similar to the Undertaker, and it's gonna be probably one of those speeches where he goes on his long list of accolades. And I mean, former WWE World Heavyweight Champion, ECW Champion, IC Champion. Not sure if he was the US Champ, but 10, 11, I think, Tag Team Championships. The guy has done it all. I wish he would have won a Royal Rumble at some point. One of the greatest big men of all time. I put him up there with guys like Taker and Kevin Nash and things like that. He's always been a favorite of mine. His teams with X-Pac and Mankind, and later on his teams with RVD. He was just such a versatile performer. His initial run there from '97 through 2003, some of his best work, without a doubt. He hit a little slump there from, 05, 06, 07, but he was always a loyal guy to Vince. He never really went elsewhere, and, say what you will with the fake Diesel and Isaac Yankem characters, but Kane was a legit superstar, and his feud with The Undertaker is just legendary. Um, I'm all for like the fantasy characters and the supernatural stuff with wrestling, because it's wrestling. Pretty much anything can happen. And seeing one of my favorites, Kane, it's gonna be great. I didn't never liked his 2013 mask when he came back to look like a piece of red, just red mess. Never liked that. That original Kane will always be epic. And shout out to Nick Kurtz for sending me that Kane figure. Just complete awesomeness. So yeah, they, similar to the Big Show, Kane has just been, all over WWE TV the past 25 years. So I'm happy to see Kane get inducted here. And we do have a rumored inductee, Mr. Monday Night, Mr. Pay-Per-View, RVD. Paul Heyman sent out a pretty cryptic tweet about RVD and filming a induction video. So a lot of people already expected RVD to go in this year, so that'll just be fantastic. Two of my all-time favorites, Kane and RVD, definitely deserve it. It really sucks that there's not going to be any fans here, but they'll take their rightful spots in the Hall of Fame. So let me know your thoughts on this year, and if you have any thoughts on the 2020 class, comment down below. And any thoughts on who may be, coming, if we might have a tag team going in this year, who may that be? And as always, we'll talk to you later. Peace!